The Office applications are, I'd say, the weakest link of the desktop environment, because the Linux equivalent of Microsoft Office is called OpenOffice, or LibreOffice is another one. It's another variation, LibreOffice, and it just doesn't quite have the same level of polish and sophistication as Microsoft's product.
Or the cost.
It's free. It is free, but I'd say that's an area where I think I'd like to see probably some more improvement on. Anyway. So this is where I would get into, I call it the editorial content of my lecture, because these are all, absolutely debatable points, but I find them, useful to think about, and so with the caveat that you talk to 3 different people out there, who know about this stuff, and they'll give you 5 different opinions. But some of the things that really attracted me to that I like about Linux, first would be security. I would say, any machine can be made terribly insecure, and any major machine out there can be made very secure. One of the things that I like about Linux is kind of the default configuration tends to be very security conscious. I just installed Windows this last week on another machine, and the default is that you're given an administrator account. So you have complete access to all of the entire machine. And so somebody goes into that account, then they can completely, they can change software, they can do whatever they wanted. One of the ideas behind Linux is, that the God account, or what's called the root account, typically is much more restricted. And so when you first, install it on your computer, it's going to give you a normal everyday user account. And if you want to use the if you want to modify software, do stuff, you just have to type an additional command on the computer. But it does segregate kind of those 2 functions: the average user versus, the user that can do, the admin that can do anything he wants on the machine. And this second bullet here, I think, is a very interesting and eternally debated point. So there are 2 schools of thought. Open source software, the beauty of open source software, anybody can grab it and look at the code and review the code. Probably the greatest example of this is you remember the infamous Heartbleed Bug. It happened about, like 9 months ago or so? It was a big deal, because what it meant, it was a bug in what's called the OpenSSL package. OpenSSL is what encrypts everything you do on the internet. There are other packages out there, but a big portion of the internet runs on OpenSSL. That's what encrypts your credit card number. It's what encrypts your username and password. It's just absolutely fundamental to everything. And it turned out that there was a bug. And what the bug would allow a clever attacker to do would be to send a very carefully crafted command to the server, and then the server would cough up basically everything that was in its memory, including, for example, the private key that would let you decrypt anything that was going on. That's bad. That was a really big deal, and and everybody who was using this version of OpenSSL had to update it very quickly to fix the bug. So this bug was discovered by, I think it was discovered independently, by at least 2 different organizations that were looking at the code, because with a library as important as OpenSSL, there are a lot of people actually looking at the code generally. They're trying to look for problems. The white hat folks that want to identify security problems and then help them be fixed, but also the black hat folks that are trying to look for exploits. Because this was open source, it became very known very quickly, and then a patch was immediately created and pushed out to everybody. When you have a closed source piece of software you're much more dependent. You're entirely dependent, pretty much, on the vendor. The author of the software to identify security problems and then fix them. So the argument is that I'd rather have everybody, including myself, have the ability to go in and look at an important piece of software, and then if something's wrong with it, somebody out there is going to fix that and publish it, as opposed to the other model, which is that you're totally dependent on the vendor to fix it. And if you're super duper paranoid, if you're worried that people are putting, some kind of backdoor or something into, critical pieces of software on your technology, you can't really do that in open source nearly as easily. You probably still could try, but people are going to find out, and it's going to become known. And so I just feel a lot more comfortable, I suppose, with open source software. And it's somewhat counterintuitive because, you think, oh, who's looking at this stuff? It's just a bunch of amateur hackers and whatnot, and people, non-professionals, and they're not hired to actually do this. Some of them are, but and I found that, I believe in practice, though, that is a very effective way of discovering problems in software and making those problems known and then solving those problems. And it's a very open and transparent way, as opposed to, oh, I better, I found a problem with this proprietary piece of software, I better go and email the vendor and let them know and then hope they push a patch out. So that's kind of the debate, and you can endlessly talk about one side or the other. But that is one of the things that I think that people think about a lot in terms of Linux. So freedom, again, this is, I would say, very similar to what I was talking about before. There are no limitations, essentially, on what you can do with the software. I don't have to get a code to unlock my software. I don't have to pay anybody. I can change it how I want. And hand in hand with that goes to the control that you have, which is you have complete control over your machine. Every aspect of it. If you want to change something about it, you can. Again, flexibility. If if I want to make a big, intensive number crunching, if I want to make a prime number finder, for example, which is a hugely processor-intensive, memory-intensive process, Linux is a great option because it scales so well. And if I want to make something that automatically water my plants, it's also a good idea. It's also a good option. One of the main reasons I ended up kind of moving over to Linux as my primary operating system that I use on a daily basis is because nothing, and this is a personal feeling, but nothing's hidden from you. A lot of times, if you get a MacBook, if you get an Apple product, it really is a beautiful, really neat experience to use those products, but you kind of have to use them in the way that Apple intended you to use them. As soon as you want to tweak something or kind of do something and change the setting or something, once you get out of their universe, it becomes much harder. And I never liked that. I liked the idea of I can, use the machine as I want to use it, not necessarily as somebody else told me I had to use it. Again, there are pluses and minuses to both of these things. My wife is swears by iPhones. She loves iPhones because it's so easy, it's so elegant, it's so beautiful to use. And I use CyanogenMod, which is an open source fork of Android. Because I can control everything and I can tweak it and modify it. There's nothing that's installed on the phone that I couldn't, in theory, go out and really check out and whatnot. So the upshot of this is you got to know what you're doing. In my favorite example, you could erase your entire computer with a single command. That's it right there. Sudo remove recursive force.
I never want to know.
Yeah. I've never, what's funny is all the years I've used Linux, I've never actually really had kind of a mistake like that. I can't think of any.
I've had
yeah. I guess, gosh, yeah. But it's not. There's not going to be a little voice that comes up saying, "Are you sure you want to do this?" So you really are kind of you're more on your own. There's less hand holding. And then probably one of the most important reasons is fun. There's a great community of people out there. It's a global community. In every different country you can imagine that write open source software, that contribute to open source software and help each other out. There are people who are passionate about technology and believe that technology can be a force for good in the world. And I think you find a lot of that in the Linux community. So if you're interested in playing around with Linux and getting it working, I would recommend, first of all, again, you can put it on a little USB key if you want, but if you really want to do it, just get an old clunky laptop or even a kind of a nicer laptop on eBay, and go ahead and install a distro of Linux on it and just start playing around. Probably the most important lesson starting out is if you're not used to using the command line, and for those of you who don't know, the command line is the interface essentially directly with the operating system. So there's no graphical user interface. It looks basically like that. But it's extraordinarily powerful. It doesn't look neat, it's just lines of text. But it is very fast and can be very effective. If I want to search, and I can demo this a little bit later, I want to search all the files on my computer, one single command, it'll do it like that. grep? Well, if you're looking for the names of files, I would use locate. But yeah, grep is a tremendously powerful tool. The philosophy behind a lot of open source software is rather than making one single big monolithic piece of software that does everything, it uses a lot of individual separate little pieces of software that just do one thing but do them very, very well. And the idea then is that, okay, you can take all these little pieces of software, string them together in a way that you need, and accomplish the same thing. And I tend to really like that approach. Like, for example, the other day, you just think of random stuff like this. I was trying to figure out, I wonder how many lines of code, this one project I'm working on, has. So how would I figure that out? And I went into Google, and there's a single command that, which is, okay, list out all of the files, and go through them, and then count the lines. And as two individual pieces of software, you pipe them together, and it's like that. It's simple. That's the beauty of it. It's really simple. You don't have to depend on, the big software application to kind of offer you that information as a feature. You just you figure out a way to do it, and you can do it very effectively. If you get, if you do get Linux, and I'll be around here to help everyone get started if they want. The place that I start is called Linux Survival. It's a tutorial. Just work through the tutorial. It gives you the introduction to the commands, and it'll just really make things. Once you get over the initial hump, it'll make things so much easier. How do I change a directory? What do I want to see? List the contents of a directory. Just the real basics that then very quickly become second nature. Next is to learn the very basics of the distro. And the way that the distro works is it has what's called a package management system. In Debian, which I use, and some other ones as well, like Ubuntu, it uses apt-get. And it's just a simple way. I want to install a piece of software on my machine. I just type in one line, sudo apt-get install whatever it is, and it'll go up and it'll pull it, grab that software, put it on the computer, install it, and then keep it updated. And if you want to get rid of it, same thing, just one simple line of code, and it'll delete that piece of software.
How did you know? Oh, sorry.
When you do the apt-get,
sure.
Are you going to a repository based on the distribution you have installed?
Yeah. I'll show you how to configure it, but you tell it the repositories you want. So Debian has the official Debian repositories, and you specify that. It's just a text file. Specify that in a text file, and then you tell it which repository you want. So, if you want the stable version of Debian, you say, okay, only pull stuff from the stable version, but if you want the latest and greatest, you do the unstable version, or the testing version is in the middle. So yeah, you can absolutely specify which repository you want. It's just a configuration.
And how did you know to use apt-get? I mean, were you looking, are there keywords you're going to look for with apt-get?
Yeah, I'll give you a demo of this in a sec, but so take my example for the computer-aided design. I type, into Google, I went, best, open source computer-aided design. I said, it gave me a couple, and one of them was FreeCAD. I said, okay, I guess I'll try FreeCAD. So then I searched the repository. I said, do you have FreeCAD? And sure enough, they did. So then I said, okay, install it. And I'll demo that in a second, exactly how you do that. And then this is, Google honestly is, aside from the machine itself, probably the most important tool out there. I mean, it's just amazing. And same with software development. I mean, you need to figure out how to do something in software. If you ever say to yourself, I really can't have been the first person to have this problem, you almost definitely are not. And you go into Google and you type it, and more often than not, it's like the first one that pops up. And probably the best site out there, the most authoritative, the most reliable site for solving anything having to do with technology is Stack Overflow. And there are different versions of Stack Overflow. There's one for servers. There's one for cooking. But the beauty of Stack Overflow is, I'll just demo it in a second. We can see for yourself. But anybody can ask questions and answer them, and then the answers get voted on. And so it is a very democratic and a very effective way of actually documenting how to do stuff. And so that's it. What we can do now is I'll give you a demo of a couple different things. First of all, I guess just my Linux machine, which is my main computer that I use, and then we can demo the Raspberry Pi. And then if you want to run Linux on it, if you want to bring a computer up, we can try and get it booted off. It'd be kind of fun to do it on an Apple product. Yeah, right. Yeah.
As far as running it, are there any problems running it under a VM virtual machine?
Oh man, it's great for that. Yeah. I mean, anytime you're running on, I was trying to think, so yeah, sure, you can get it on a clunky laptop or even a pretty good laptop. But what if I want the super computer? What if I want to, I have some big machine learning application and I need ridiculous amounts of processing. I'm not going to go out and buy that. Just get an account on Amazon Web Services and rent it. You rent it by the hour, as much as you want. Yeah, as much memory, as much processing power as you want. It's right there, and that is all running via virtual machines. So yeah, Linux is really, it's just totally, that's what it's made for almost. You can run it on anything, physical hardware or virtual machine.
Is there a possible performance boost from running on a stick versus?
Oh, it's going to be slower running on, I don't know, it's a good question.
Because, if you've got an ancient laptop, not much memory, very slow hard drive.
Well, the only thing that happens is when it boots off of this, all that means is it moves the contents of the memory here onto your RAM, and it's running off of your RAM. And so, you actually don't really even need this thing after it boots up. So it still won't. The neat thing about Linux is you can turn off all the junk that you don't need. And so that's one of the nice things about running on older equipment is you don't even need a graphical user interface if you don't want one. So turn that off. That'll save a tremendous amount of juice.
What do you know to turn on? Like you go to Best Buy and you buy a computer. They put so much junk.
Yeah, you bet.
On there.
Yeah.
It's not really. We call it something.
Bloatware.
What's that?
Bloatware.
Bloatware.
Yeah. So same with your phone too.
Absolutely. So
the thing
is, does Linux come with bloatware?
No. Well, the short answer is no. The more complete answer is when you get it off the shelf, so to speak. You just download the standard version and put it on your computer. They include with it a bunch of software that they think the average user will want. So your typical let's just stop talking about this in the abstract.
Kind of like roster. Is it okay if I make a copy of the roster on my phone or and then email it to everybody? Is that okay?
Nice.
Yeah.
I have my slides up on SlideShare too, so you can, if you're interested, you can grab the presentation. So here's Debian. Doesn't look like much, but so if you wanted to get it, you know, you basically just download the installation image, and this will come packaged with, again, what the people at Debian think is the standard, kind of what the average user will want. But you can uninstall tons of it if you want. And so let me give you an introduction to the command line. So let's say, for example, there's a great segue. So let's say I want to figure out, oh, we got to pause it.